everybody, and happy Friday. I'm super excited to be back. Last week, I celebrated my 21st anniversary of my 21st birthday. That's what I'm calling it. And I had just a relaxing day with my kiddos. We went and ate too much sushi and hibachi, but hey, how else are you going to celebrate your birthday? Super excited to be back today. My guest is Gloria, and she has a different kind of angle in engineering and manufacturing. So I'm super glad we're going to be talking about leadership and culture today. If you know myself, like one of my good friends, Jim Mayer, he's another culture guy, and we are actually writing a book. And the other day we decided to change the angle of our book. So we'll see how that whole process goes, but I'll be making more posts around that just to kind of tease it out, and hopefully we can get people to look at that. But Gloria, hello, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Happy to be here, and also happy that it's Friday.
Yeah, right? I love ending my weeks with Mavens of Manufacturing because it just gets me energized for the weekend, and I cut out of work a little early. So yeah, it's a good day. If you're tuning in, feel free to drop some comments in the comments section. Say hello. Tell us where you're from. We already got one. Courtney, what's up? How are you? I cannot wait for the book to come out so you can read it as well. If you don't know Courtney, please follow her. She is part of Automation Ladies. They just had a really successful event called OT Skatacon over the week of my birthday. So if you're in PLC programming and automation, that's the place to be. I heard it's a great event. It's really educational. So be sure to follow her, Nikki Gonzalez, and Ali G, and check that event out for next year. But let's get back to Gloria. So Gloria, give us an introduction of yourself. You know, how did you get involved in what you're doing with leadership in engineering and manufacturing?
Sure. Well, it goes back originally to working on a manufacturing line on the night shift while I was going to school. And it was good, steady work. It gave me time in the mornings to continue my education. So my roots are in manufacturing. I quickly then learned that I wanted to be in human resources. I don't know why, but I thought
what resources?
Human resources.
Okay. HR. Got it.
HR, yeah, I'm going into the HR space. And so I thought, well, if you're in HR, you can be helpful and make a difference. And I quickly learned that HR can be a force for good or a force for slowing things down and being problematic. And I certainly didn't want to be that. And so that's where the focus on how to be a different kind of HR leader became a priority for me, because HR folks can help shape culture or get in the way of it, frankly.
Yeah, they definitely can get in the way of it. I've worked with some companies where I'm just like, why are you here? Why are you even here? Because you're not helping the problem. You're kind of just escalating it. But I want to get more information about your experience working on the line. So you said you took a manufacturing job working on a line while you were going to school. So what type of manufacturing was the company doing that you were involved with?
Manufacturing hunting and sporting knives, so good old buck knives. I worked there. It was a great environment, a great culture. And so I worked in the fabrication side of things, making, doing the metal work, if you will, stamping, doing the chamfer on it. So not technically assembly, but doing the fabrication work, which would then go to the actual assembly line. So I thought really fun. I got competitive and would check what the first shift person did in terms of their output and their quality. And I just wanted to make sure that I could top what they did earlier in the day.
I love that. Metal fabrication is one of my favorite things ever. And FabTech is coming up soon in September. And it's just a different kind of smell in the McCormick Center when it's FabTech, because it's all the metal.
Yeah, and the burning and the grinding.
Yeah. I just, for whatever reason, I love that smell. And I went to a shop in Illinois, and the guy actually has his own blacksmiths. So they're actually like hammering out the stamps that they're creating, and it's all custom made. And it was the coolest section in his shop that I saw, because it was just two guys hammering it out, doing it old school, and the smell, like I just was like, I don't want to leave this area of your shop. I just want to hang out here.
That that makes it more enjoyable because the next company I went to work for when I was in HR manufactured ophthalmic lenses, and it was chemicals, and that smell is very different and not as pleasant.
I bet I wouldn't want to work there. Hank says, hi, working at home today. Girls are at day camp, so not with me today. Well, that's too bad. Tell Peyton and Aiden I said hello, and I hope they're enjoying their jackets that we gave to them. So we're going to be diving into what really takes to build a workplace people actually want to be in. So manufacturing kind of has this Jekyll and Hyde type persona around it. There's companies that are really good at work culture, and there are other companies that are horrible at it. And it's not uncommon to hear people say, I'm just going to my job for the paycheck.
Right.
Like that's the only reason why I'm showing up. My brother is one of those individuals. He absolutely does not like the place that he works at. And it's just people are more treated as a number than they are human. So you mentioned that you got into HR and that kind of was the beginning of your journey to what you're now doing. So what sparked your passion for leadership and culture, and how did that lead you to what you're doing now at HPWP Group? And while you're answering that question, feel free to give us an overview of HPWP Group and tell us a little bit about what you guys do there.
Sure. What's really sparked my passion was another leader coming into our company where I was an HR person, and that's Sue Bingham. And she, oddly enough, is the founder of HPWP Group. So where the spark came for me is she came in with a very different perspective and this philosophy called PEP, Positive Employee Philosophy. And it really shifted how we look at people. It shifted those processes and policies that we have in our organizations, either reinforce it or, more importantly, counter it. We put in a lot of bureaucracy and policies, and we put so much of a limiting belief on people. So that really opened up my perspective even more to be the kind of HR person that I wanted to be and that the company deserved, right? And that is one of being more of a partner, looking for ways to leverage people and grow and develop them, because when you do, performance increases. She left. We only worked together for a short period of time, probably a year, but it had such an impact on me. And we did things radically different than we had before she came. Viewed more as the police. So fast forward, we kept in touch because she was a mentor to me.
Okay, I was going to ask that. She was one of your mentors.
A mentor, still is a mentor to me. So fast forward almost 20 years later, she's setting up her own. She'd been a solopreneur. She decided to set up a company and bring people on board. I'm like, I'm in. I want to focus solely on culture and bringing culture and value to more leaders, more companies, because people deserve it, and the work world deserves it. So she and I, I'm aging myself now, because HPWP Group has been in business officially as a business for 20 years now. And HPWP is High Performance Workplace.
Okay.
And so that's what those letters stand for, is High Performance Workplace. And it is about creating environments where people love to work. It's based on 8 elements that really contribute to creating a positive culture and a high-performing work environment. And we do that through training, through mindset shifts, and through really taking a look at how we set things up in organizations and get rid of policies that don't make sense, push decision-making to the closest level possible. So a variety of different things.
So who's getting in touch with you for your services? Like, is it someone that's head of HR and they're just getting complaint after complaint about their work culture? Is it, CEOs who might have been coming into a company and took it over? Like, who is reaching out to you saying, hey, we really need your help and brainstorm some ideas here?
Good question. That shifted over time. It used to be people who are feeling the most pain. And then now it shifted from people who are experiencing pain. with turnover and problems like that? Typically not HR, because they tend
Okay.
to feel ownership of that stuff. There are more progressive HR folks out there, forward-thinking HR folks out there now that are our target group. But what we're dealing with more now are the visionary leaders who understand the importance of culture and how the role that people play in the culture. We're living in crazy, chaotic times. The world is difficult. Things change constantly. And it's not the rate of change is not going to slow down. And so really leaders who are trying to be forward thinking and go, okay, how do we either keep up, but more importantly, how do we get ahead of the curve with the change that's coming at us? Because more change is on the horizon with more technology and AI, and disruption is just going to keep coming.
Well, I think another thing too that we're facing is with the ability to be on technology. And real quick, I want to shout out Angela, who is on here. Angela Thurman, thank you for joining us today from Texas. If you are looking for a project management guru, she is your gal. So make sure to reach out to her on LinkedIn. She's awesome and amazing. Highly intelligent as well too. I love talking to her because I learned so much from her. But I've noticed this with technology, everything has become so self-centered and self-absorbed. So there's a lot of like me, I, and conversations. And like, even with some of the posts that I'm seeing on LinkedIn, like it's very individualistic, if that's like the appropriate way to describe it. Like a lot of like, look at me, here's everything that I'm doing. And with manufacturing and engineering, a few of my earlier guests were actually Rosie's the Riveters, like the original Rosie the Riveters. And it wasn't about them as individuals, it was about them as part of the communities that they were in and the societies that they were in. And it was a bigger picture than them. Like there was a bigger purpose beyond the sense of self. And I think there are some companies who they're just thinking about that one thing, like the profit and the productivity. So especially with like automation and robotics, a lot of things tend to steer away from the human part of it. And I just recently wrote an article about design with a pulse. So like why we can't just focus on designing to automate something, but we also need to focus on designing something that an actual human can, you know, operate it and maintain it and understand it. So, you know, from your perspective in terms of leadership, what are the key differences between traditional leadership styles and that human-centered leadership that I'm hearing more conversations around these days? What are the key differences?
To me, the key differences are traditional is really rooted in hierarchy and the top-down side of things, right? It is command and control. You know, the people in these positions at the higher level are the ones who make the decision. It's about, you know, people may be offended, but it's also about control. Like these are the processes, these are the ways that we do things. And it is essentially performance at all costs, right? And we don't see people as a part of that process. Contrast that with human-centered leadership, and that really is about believing in people, having this shared purpose. It's also grounded in trust, right? We believe in and trust the people who are working on our team. We know that we've got a shared purpose, which is to get results, meet the objectives, meet the mission or vision of the company. And it's that acknowledgement and realization and acknowledgement that people are the difference in making high performance sustainable, right? Any company, every company can have the same kind of technology. I can advance mine, you can advance yours. A key difference is the people the people on our teams. And human-centered leadership is the mindset of we take care of people and the people take care of the business.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, with that trust component also comes respect, right? So you can't do the command and demand type leadership because that can instill fear in people. And if you fear something, you don't respect it, right? So you're always there's always this subconscious thought process in the back of your mind when you fear something instead of respecting it. I can't remember what movie it was, but I want to say Robert De Niro was in the movie, but there was this whole conversation around, respecting something and fearing something. And you would rather have someone respect you than fear you, because with fear comes like this sense of revenge and retaliation. You don't want that. So,
and
what
that's
have you?
but that's the worst case, is the revenge side.
Oh,
Otherwise what you get is you get people playing it small. And you can't get
yeah.
high performance when people play it small. If people are fearful, or we're managing by fear, people do just enough. They put their heads down and they do just enough to be
They
successful.
just show up.
They
Yeah.
just show up
For the
right?
paycheck. So how do trust and respect translate into performance and profitability? Like, what have you seen?
Yeah. When you have high levels of trust, you have higher levels of, I can say engagement, but what I really want to say is it's commitment. We tend to accept compliance in the work world, comply with the procedures, comply with safety, comply with standards. And when you have high trust, what you're doing is you're building a sense of commitment, and commitment builds ownership. It makes people feel like owners, and they step up more. They're willing to take more risks, thoughtful risks. They share ideas and thoughts. And when you have all that, you get to better outcomes. You get to improved efficiency, better quality. You get to better customer engagement. I mean, any metric anything you can measure improves significantly when trust levels are high, because people own it. They don't pass the buck. They don't blame others. They see a problem, they get in, and they work on it. And they bring new, fresh ideas to make things even better, even when there's not a problem.
But I think also too, another point that just came in my mind is that sense of accountability, right? That it's going to increase accountability. So if someone fails at something, they're not going to be afraid to admit, hey, I messed up here.
Yep.
And that's actually going to help with their bottom line as well too, because when you can admit your mistake right away instead of pointing fingers at other people, you can work on resolving it then, right from that point.
Yep.
So I think that's a great point. We have people commenting, so I don't want to miss these comments. But Kelly said, good morning, everyone. Hello, Kelly. Thank you for coming and joining us. 100% highlighting our community is the best way to truly understand where it's headed and what's needed to further the space. Absolutely. And then Dana perfectly said, Gloria. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you all have any questions for Gloria, why we're having this conversation, please do not hesitate to ask those questions. I like when our audience is engaged, and it's just better for you if you can get your own personal questions answered. Do you have any real world examples that you can share with us on teams that were transformed through the HPWP approach?
Yes, absolutely. And I saw Dana Bogardus's name pop up, and she works at a company that is the epitome of high performance. For them, I think they've sold off now, but for them, it was a family company, and trust was a high, high, high value. So much so that when you walk into their manufacturing operations, it's on the walls, it's on the mats on the floor. They created such a trusting environment that people are committed, that people do feel like owners. And I remember this one situation where they lost a major customer, and that meant that they would need to combat that. And so a group of people got pulled together and said, we got to pull X dollars out of the business. And it was a pretty big amount. And they got employees at all levels, leaders, and said the only parameter is nobody loses their job. So how can we cut this significant dollar amount out? People went to work at that. They came up in less than 60 days with the money, with the cost savings to offset that. That is, talk about high levels of trust. It's the company and the leadership saying, we're trusting you with this information. This is a big hit to us. Now let's all work together to try to fix that. and nobody was fearful about losing their jobs because that was clearly taken off the table. And you can't do that. You can't pull that off if you don't have a high trust environment. You
Yeah.
can't pull it off very easily anyways.
That's like a common theme now that I'm hearing a lot with people who are outside of like the things that are being automated. They're a little skeptical when companies start automating the processes because they think, oh, I'm going to lose my job or this is going to replace me. And it really does take leadership to have those conversations and make the workers on the floor part of that buy-in process with some of these automated processes. But from your experience and the work that you do at HPWP, what are some of the outdated practices that you see still plaguing some of the companies that you're working with?
Yeah. A couple of things come to mind. One is the policies that we have in place. We tend to make our policy manuals like this deep because and they're geared for the people who are the problem. That's the small percentage of the group. The vast majority of people who work in our companies, they're good, responsible people. And we place so much burden and emphasis on the people who aren't, that we put in this policy, we put in this policy, we revise this policy. Those have a negative effect on the good people, right? Good people can get caught up in them. I can go on a rant forever about policies. Policies also focus on what people can't and shouldn't do, rather than let's focus on expectations. Expectations for how we show up, expectations for how we deal with these kinds of situations here or this kind of situation here. Put it in the form of expectation. And to me, the other thing that I think is an outdated practice is really limiting jobs. And I think this happens more heavily in manufacturing because we have a person who does this job and a person who does this job and a person who does this job and a person who does this job. We make them so finite that we make them a little more rigid. Whereas if we broaden jobs, did more cross-training, then we'd have people have a full understanding of the process. People are more, most people like variety, right? Most people feel higher level of value when they're contributing in different ways. And so I think we still have an opportunity to really take a look at how we structure jobs and can make them more broad, because frankly, people are capable of more than just that one job that they're doing. So those are probably the two that come to mind most. Oh, I do have a third. It's the way we treat performance problems, right? We typically do the verbal, written, final warning. We do performance improvement plans, the dreaded PIP. And all that is a setup for 3 strikes and you're out. And it doesn't engage in real problem solving. It doesn't get to the root cause of the problem. And so we really advocate for a high performance coaching approach, which is talk with the individual, find out what's causing it. And then when the cause is identified, the individual identifies solutions. And when they identify the solutions, they're committing versus get better or else. I probably should have moved that one up to the top because I'm most passionate about it.
So I can relate to a lot of this conversation because I worked with a family-owned company, and there was this mentality of it's our way or the highway type of mentality. But there was a difference in the generations of the family and their attitude and how they treated people that were not part of the family. And I was part of the generation of the younger individual coming in and having to prove themselves to the rest of the family because they were already fired once before by the family. So now they came back, they had to prove themselves. And I feel like that was a little hindering for them because they ended up micromanaging a lot of stuff that we had to do as a department. And there was a lack of trust from this individual to the rest of the team. And it was always like, well, this is my last name. And and it was that fear-based type of leadership and micromanagement. And it just did not work. And a lot of, and I mean, I ended up getting fired because I'm very opinionated.
But you take
it
that
was
as a badge of honor in that kind of environment.
right. But looking back, I don't think this individual was a horrible human being. I think there was a lot of pressure on them to be successful, especially after coming back into the situation. So in situations like that, how do leaders begin to rebuild trust with their employees, but also what sort of resources are you providing for that younger generation of leaders? Because sometimes they can be a little naive and a little like, I have to prove myself and like egotistical. And I don't think that's like because they're a bad person.
No.
I just think it's an inexperience and there is a side of pressure for them to be successful. So like, how do you
Well,
approach that?
yeah, and I think this is just, it doesn't matter, what generation you're talking about. It is, we tend to adopt the leadership style of the people who are our leaders, right? And so we've just created this machine of leadership that's top down, that's control oriented. And we've got to begin shifting that. Because I do think younger leaders are like, feel the pressure a little bit more. And then, and they're less likely probably to buck the system, because if that's the way that we do it, and for the one leader you're talking about who's got something to prove to his own family, he had his own level of fear. It really starts with changing your mindset, and that's a big part of what we focus on at HPWP, is leading with positive assumptions, because the more clear you can be about assuming the best in people versus going straight to the negative and straight to the worst, then it opens up your mindset to be more curious. And if you're more curious, you're asking questions. If you're more curious, you're getting to know people. So for us, that's really a starting point. And for us, it's creating that awareness of a different way to lead, with also real practical tools that you can take back to work to start making a difference within your own team. We also work with companies who want to bring that forward as an entire culture, but a lot of people come and they're still working in a pretty traditional environment, but they still want to do things differently as an individual leader.
Yeah. Like in the performance review, I think they about had a heart attack because I had to sign a piece of paper and I was like, I'm not signing this. You came in late. You told me all these things that I did wrong. One of them was, oh, people on the shop floor are complaining about you. And I'm like, well, who's complaining about me? And I was friends with everybody on the shop floor. And I knew that that wasn't the case. And I was like, I think it's you that's complaining about me. And you didn't want to admit to that. Yep. And then after coming in late, they left early. And I was like, I'm not signing this. None of my questions were answered. There were no metrics of success established for this one. I'm not doing this. I'm not signing it. So it was like this big ordeal. And again, I just don't think like they were given the tools to be a successful leader. Like things have changed. Like they're definitely doing better, which is great. Like I love to hear that, but I just think there needs to be also a performance type of situation, like review for younger leaders who are set up to lead a company, especially if it's family.
Yep. And the emphasis really should be on a proactive plan. What's the expectation of a leader? We've got to redefine the expectations of people in leadership positions, because otherwise people go to the job description, which is I got to supervise this production line or that production line. I have to make sure the quality checks are done or the reports are done, rather than we ought to be redefining leadership to say it is your responsibility to create a high performing environment through training, developing your team, and whatever other things that we want to put in there. It's your responsibility to resolve conflict, to coach performance proactively. We have to redefine what the expectations are of leadership. And so it's a perfect opportunity when you put someone into a leadership position for the first time to sit down and say, here's the expectation. Let's talk about what are your thoughts about that? What do you like about that? What questions do you have about that? What are you looking for? What support do you need? And let's build a development plan together. And then you got to have a regular cadence of communication and feedback with them, because leadership isn't rosy all the time, and there will be some problems and challenges with it, but we can deal with them as adults.
I think there should be, like, whether it's anonymous or whatever, I think there should be a feedback loop from the individuals that are underneath that leadership, so that the leadership can have some sort of constructive criticism too, because it doesn't work if your whole company is not working like a fine-tuned wheel, and you have to be willing to accept criticism if you want to provide it and give it. And I just think that that's fair. And a lot of leaders don't like doing that.
They don't, but we should create good people want to get better is our motto, and good people get better through feedback. And as leaders, if you really want to be vulnerable, sit down with your team and ask ask for them to answer a couple questions. What do you think our function does really well? What do you think we could be doing a little differently? What could make it even better? What went well, even better if? And if we do that around work kinds of things, then you get to a point where as a leader, you can say, we work together. Let's talk about expectations. How am I showing up for you? What else do you need?
Yeah, right. I mentioned Jim Mayer before. I do want to bring up some of these comments because we're getting flooded and I love this. So responsibility without risk of retaliation. I love that. Angela, thank you. Dana said this environment allows people to learn new things and grow their skills. Kelly, what are some things that manufacturing leadership can do to enable their workforce to think about the next step after automation? That's a great question. Do you have any insights for that?
Yeah, I would say don't involve them after the automation, get them involved in the automation process. So if you're looking at doing automation, pull in people who are going to be the ones who will be responsible or understand the process well. Because when you build people into that process, you're going to get better outcomes, and they can help you with that. How do we roll it out?
Yeah,
part of the change-making side of things.
It's usually the first people to know when something's not going right is the people on the shop floor. And sometimes that information doesn't get translated correctly from middle management to upper management. So you really have to have that line of communication and, involve everybody in those types of meetings so that you can get the full picture. Because I've seen where there's a disconnect between the communication with the shop floor and upper management because middle management didn't communicate it very well. Not because they were trying to be malicious in any way. It was just people interpret things differently. So you should have those meetings. Inherently, you have to have the staff that already knows the product. There has to be a way to enable them to involve in it. Yep, I agree with that. Cross-training is key. It allows employees to take time off without feeling guilty and expand their horizons. Absolutely. Is also a risk to mitigation factor. Yes. Ryan Tanaka just jumped on, but this conversation needs to be heard more widely in all industries. Love it. Thank you, Ryan. Ryan is helping me with my marathon training, so I really appreciate him. Adopt the leadership of our own leaders. Angela said job descriptions are a wish list of what management would like a role to include and often include too much content. No one could humanely accomplish the full list. Absolutely. I think we need to upgrade our job description process. One of the most annoying things for me on a job description is how they list all of the responsibilities and expectations, and then in small fine print at the bottom, and
all other duties assigned.
Yes. No. Like, if this doesn't fit within the salary range that you are focusing on, no, like there needs to be conversations. Like if I'm taking on more than what you listed in this 2-page job description, we need to we need to have a conversation around compensation. If your leadership isn't receptive to leadership, is there a way to provide that feedback in a way that might stick? That's a good question. What do you say to that, Gloria?
That is a good question. to me, it still goes back to having the expectation. And we shouldn't lessen our expectation of leaders. The challenge is we promote really good, hardworking, dedicated, loyal people into leadership positions. And then we say, congratulations. Oh, we so appreciate you. You're promoted. Good luck. And then we wash our hands and don't do anything with them. So we need to rethink the process in which we put people in leadership positions. We need to have a more robust process to really assess their leadership capabilities. When you have somebody who isn't, who's already in that job, who isn't receptive or open, that's where we've got to, maybe the term is a little tough love. We have to do that reflection, which is to say, look, I've shared with you that a key expectation of a leader is to do this. And what I'm not getting from you is that you see that as a priority. I haven't seen a change in that. I'd like to understand why. And sometimes we just have to say, look, this is the expectation. You got to decide if this is something that you want to, if you want to work on, if this is something that you want to meet.
So Ryan makes a great point here. Like, not all leadership is going to be receptive to criticism. So do you have any tips or tricks for employees to navigate those difficult conversations? I know my good friend Jim had this question asked kind of in a similar way at some presentations, and his harshest advice is, well, if they're not going to listen to you, go somewhere else. Like, go work with a company that's going to be compatible with your values. But do you have an answer to this type of question?
Yeah. I love that as advice, because the reality is most people in that situation aren't rebels like you, Megan. They're not brave enough to want to discuss it or debate it. People still live with fear. So they're a lot, they're just much more reluctant to raise it or to push back. I would say that you still have to be true to yourself. You still got to be respectful. Where you work and the value you have should be recognized. The value you offer should be recognized. And if you're feeling that you're not being valued or heard or listened to, I think you have a responsibility to be respectful in your communication, to say, look, I want to talk about how things are going here because I've got some concerns. Or I'm not, I'd like to delve into this a little deeper because I don't, I'm worried about fairness. I mean, we still have to be willing to say those things. When you do it, it feels good. I remember back early in my career, I worked directly for my boss, who was the CFO at the time, and I felt this constant undermining. And I finally went in to his office and said, look, I don't feel like you value me, trust me, or respect me. And I want to talk about that. I didn't go in with accusations or you did this or you did that. I shared how I felt, which was not valued, not trusted, not respected. And that opened the door for a conversation because he wasn't defensive. He became curious. He said, well, what do you mean? How? And then I gave him examples of where he would go around me to some of the management, right? And I just said, look, this sends a message that people can keep coming to you, or that the input and the conversations I'm having aren't important. Things got better with him because he was still a good guy. But boy, the relief, the self-confidence that I had with letting him know how I felt. And so I just want people to get comfortable with leaning into that discomfort and know yourself and know your value and find a way to share the impact. I feel like I skirted all the way around that. But
no, I love that though. I think some of the key words we need to focus on too, and why I'm talking about this, Courtney said, Ryan Tanaka, 100% lead the way. My leaders taught me. This is why I think it's important to share. Good leadership trickles down. Important leadership is corrected. Ryan agreed with that. And then Ayush totally agreed. And then Ryan, I feel like great reminder to use those words. So a lot of the words that you said that stuck with me are assumptions, curiosity, I feel. And there's a book out there called Crucial Conversations.
Yes.
And I love that book because I from my own personal experiences and own personal trauma, because the way we feel about ourselves and how that gets projected about how we assume things about others is rooted in traumatic experiences. Like
Yep.
it's deep rooted. So if you don't take a step back outside of your own personal assumptions that you've gotten from your personal experiences, you're going to assume the worst in certain individuals. So, like, one example they provided is like, if someone were to say a joke to me that I knew very well, I wouldn't get offended by it if it was said by someone else that I didn't know. Because my personal experience with that individual that I know very well, I already know that they're not coming from a malicious place. Where if it was said by someone else that I didn't know and I didn't trust, there's these assumptions that I make by that individual. And I'm like, oh, they're just trying to be malicious and offend me and hurt me, when
Yep.
it's just a joke. So anyone that's tuning in, get that book. It's really, really good. And everything that Gloria is saying, it can be related to that book. And I like that you said he became curious and not offended, and then
Yep.
started asking you questions to get clarification of why you felt the way
Yep.
that you did. And I think that is a great segue into my next question about, what are the key behaviors of inclusive leaders? And I think curiosity is one of them. Are there any others
Yeah.
that we can
Yeah.
identify?
I do think so. Curiosity is key. We also, listening, right? Listening. We have a person on our team who says, God gave you two ears and one mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak. And when I say listen, it's listen to understand, not listen to respond. And I think the trap for leaders is we're doing enough listening so that we can jump in with a response, which means we're not listening fully. So I think listening to really truly understand versus respond is key. Um, the other is being intentional about bringing more voices to the conversation, right? If you are an inclusive leader, you value people, you value their ideas, you value the diversity of thought and opinion, we've got to find ways to not find ways, we need to actively seek that out. So people who are inclusive leaders actively seek that out. And they are much more, you're more willing to build differences on your team. We tend to hire people who are more like us, and that's got a lot of benefit. And what it's missing is different perspectives. Different perspectives of generations, of cultures. Those differences can give you an aha or a different thought, and can lead to a better outcome. So I think those are some of the ones that show up for me. The other is, as leaders, we need to be willing to be just a little more real and human ourselves. We've been taught to keep this professional distance from the people on our teams, like they're not your friends. And it's like, look, it's work and life are all, meshed up in together. If you know people and you're willing to share a little bit about yourself, that builds trust. That builds inclusivity, and all of that just, builds to connection and higher performance.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a lot of things that happen around in our world around us. Politics being one, which I'm not here to like say which way I lay or whatever, but I just feel like the intention of the political spectrum divides us more than brings us together. And like, I remember a while ago, I was at an event. I was speaking on a women's panel, and it was just right when Wade versus Roe got switched. And the woman that was speaking, she's a leader of a major company in engineering and manufacturing. And I did not envy her at this moment, because she had phone calls from some of her middle level managers who were women, and they were like, how does this affect my position here? Like, what if I need something? Like, how is that gonna? And she had to wear several hats during that conversation. It was a really difficult conversation. And she's like, I'm going to make sure that all of our employees feel safe and comfortable, and they know that they will get the care they need no matter what the situation is, and they won't be discriminated against that. And there's a lot of things in engineering and manufacturing that I feel still gets swept under the rug, whether that's around someone's sexuality, whether it's around their identity, whether it's around, they make a decision to be a parent. And this is for both men and women. And there is a lot of like bashing of individuals, whether they're old white men, whether they're women of color, what like it's there, whether, they are homosexual, like there's a lot of bashing there. All of that said, how can manufacturers create cultures where everyone from the shop floor to the C-suite feel engaged and feel safe? Because it is a tough thing to juggle. It's also very tough for leaders who might have specific values that don't line up with other people's values, which is totally fine. Like, one of the things that Jim Mayer says is you want to work with companies that you're compatible with. So it's not just a one-way street. It's not just up to the leaders of a company. It's also up to the person who wants to work at that company. If you don't align with their values, don't work there. Leave.
Right.
Find a company that does align with. So what is your insight on that? How can manufacturers create cultures where everyone feels engaged, everyone feels safe, without bringing too much of that to the forefront? Because I feel like in some instances, that's no one's business.
Yeah.
Right.
And it is very public. And the executive orders that come down, the decisions that come down cause people questions, right? It causes emotions. And when emotions are high, that's when we're all uncomfortable. And we want to tend to say, well, we don't talk about that kind of stuff at work, or that's not relevant. We have to resist the temptation to go to judgment. Judgment is a human response. And leaders in particular need to be models of folks who are leading with curiosity, who are leading with an openness to understand perspectives, understand concerns, rather than rush to judgment on them. And that means we've got to create space to get to know people. Because if we can start establishing connections with folks from the very beginning, these tougher conversations are a lot easier to handle. We don't overreact. I mean, we don't want to be the targets of the world who pull back DEI because of the executive order, and then they get a 40-day Lent boycott on them, right? We shouldn't have knee-jerk reactions. And it's so much easier to not have those knee-jerk reactions if we make it a priority to connect with people. Because then we're dealing with that. Somebody can come to us. The psychological safety is there. They can come to us in private and just say, I'm really concerned by this. Where are we at? We get to do a lot of active listening, probe to understand their perspective more. And when we can do that, then it's more clear what are those kinds of actions we can take. Sometimes people just need a good listener, and sometimes we need to formulate a plan and take action. And if I, as an individual leader, have people coming to me, I'm going to do that, be the good listener, and then I'm going to go talk to others in the company, whether they be HR, more senior leadership, and say, here's what I'm hearing. And we've got some folks who are concerned. So let's talk about how we tackle it, because we're not done with the Hobbs decision or executive orders on DEI. These things are going to continue to keep coming at us, and good inclusive leaders can easily weather the storm. And I know I'm being redundant here, but it comes back to having a connection, a real connection with the people on your team. If you've got them on your team, you should be caring about them, and their ideas, their input, their perspectives matter. Doesn't have to be yours, but you're creating space for them to share it.
It's about keeping that human element in the focus, because there's some things out there that people do that I don't necessarily agree with. That's okay. Like, I don't have to agree with it, but to disrespect someone and their own personal feelings and opinions, I just that's not okay. Like,
It's not.
I can get to a level of agreeing to disagreeing with someone, but then to like go out of my way and try to slander an individual, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that. And I've seen leaders do that, and I just tell people, don't go work for them. Like,
Yeah.
stay as far away from them as possible and
Yeah.
don't work for them. And I think that's like the route to take in some of these companies. So I really want to.
I just want to jump in here and say, we also have to remember that as human beings, we have more in common than not. We have more similarities than not. We're making judgments on people based upon a couple of different things. I just want to give a shout out to a great nonprofit, livingroomconversations.org. They talk about diverse voices, and they have guides for practical guides for having difficult conversations on just any range of topics in the world. And for me, when you get connected with that as a thought process, it makes it easier on the leadership side.
I'm gonna have to take a look at that. I do want to get your advice for execs, because I was attending one of Jim Mayer's presentations, and he did get approached by someone who was part of the older generation and believed in some of the older ways, and basically kind of was saying that all this conversation around culture stuff is soft stuff. Like, it shouldn't be important. It shouldn't be prioritized. What advice do you have execs for that? Like, who believe in that kind of thing?
My advice is, if you really believe in that thing, consider retiring and sometime soon.
Get out of here.
I mean, it's not sound. It's just not sound practical advice. Culture has never been a soft thing. Your retention figures, your turnover figures, that's a reflection of your culture. I mean, so we're already measuring that stuff, and that's a reflection of culture. The world is changing, and people are changing. The generations are changing. And if you want to, you can't bury your head in the sand and say culture's not important, because for Gen Z and for millennial, it's so much more crucial. And if COVID taught us anything, COVID taught us people have choices in where they work, what they do, where they do it, and who they work for. Right. And that's just the reinforcement of the fact that culture is growing in importance with generations coming into the workplace. And so if you say it's soft, then, I got my fingers crossed for you that your business survives.
Yeah, I have my own personal opinion about those traditionalists. I'll keep that to myself. Xavier said it's soft till it gets hard. All right, there, Xavier. Keep this PG, please.
That's funny on a number of levels.
Right. So let's get your insights of, what you think the future of leadership in this sector is going to look like. Why should manufacturing lead the charge in redefining work environments, and how do you think that looks in the future for us?
Well, manufacturing is highly competitive. I mean, what manufacturing in the U.S. is challenging in and of itself, because we're competing with offshore, we're competing with other countries who do it cheaper, if you will, with labor. So that's just going to continue to make things more challenging for manufacturing. I think it's also even more important for manufacturers to create and focus on culture, because people are got to figure out where they want to spend their time. There are less people interested in working those frontline jobs in manufacturing. And so having a good culture, having some broader responsibilities will make a difference. You can just look at the population. If you study Gen Z, I heard a recent statistic with Gen Z that 50% of them don't work in companies. They do their own thing. So in a weird way, the labor pool is shrinking, if you will, and culture is going to make a huge difference. Not to mention the fact that all of the technology changes and AI and the need for reskilling and upskilling. When you have that kind of change coming at you, culture, a strong culture makes it easier to navigate changes and advancements, new processes and applications, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest myths around this younger generation is that they don't want to work.
Yeah,
And I
that's
just
yes.
seeing my daughter and how she busts her ass, like
Yep.
she loves working. She likes making money, but she doesn't like bullshit. So she's
Exactly.
like, no, I'm not. If you don't follow through with what you say, or you say you're one thing and then act another, no,
Yeah,
thank you. Like I'm not doing that. And it's amazing to me how many places she has left because she just with the culture. She's like, I don't have to put up with this. Where back in the day, I was just like, I need the money. I can't quit this job. Like, no
and
way.
and that's the difference. In our leadership workshop, we do a 4-day experiential leadership workshop, and one of the things we start out with is, what's your biggest leadership challenge? And I would routinely hear people say, well, the kids today. And finally I said, well, whose kids are they? They're our kids. They're our kids, and we raise them differently. We raise them to not put up with the BS. We want our kids to be excited about the work that they do, to be valued at a company. So we've instilled that in our children. And I'm going to pat myself on the back for doing that. And I think we all should. And that's what we're dealing with. Is we've got a generation coming in that is going, yep, no, I'm not going to do what my parents and grandparents did before me, which was hunker down, survive to retirement, or stay there long enough to get the, gold watch, if you will.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of questions too that I hear from kids that I've like worked with or collaborated with, they want to know what that bigger picture is. Well, why they always ask why? Why is this important? Or what is this going into? And why does that matter? And how is this helping this issue? So like they do have their values and the things that they're passionate about. We just suck at explaining it. And
Yeah.
that's like where I'm trying to come in. I'm like trying to get some engineers and manufacturers out of their shell and, get excited why they're creating these things, because the younger generation is looking at that and they want to know why. And if we can't tell them, then they're going to go on to the next one.
Right.
And until something catches their eye. But we are coming up on time, Gloria. I could spend all day talking to you about culture and stuff, and I really enjoy this conversation. I want to introduce you to Jim, because I think you guys would have a really interesting conversation as well. But if there's one thing that every manufacturing leader could do today or this week to create a better workplace, what could that be? What's one thing they could do?
Yeah. And for me, I'm going to keep it simple and say, just start to get to know people. Schedule some one-on-ones where you're listening. It's not your meeting, it's their meeting. And it may be awkward at first if you haven't done this, but dedicate some time, doesn't have to be a long time, dedicate 30 minutes, pull some folks off to the side and just say, look, I want to have a conversation. I hear your thoughts. How are things going? What do you like? What could be better? Just
I
get to know
love
people.
that. Well, for anyone who is having a hard time with their culture at work, or if they have any questions for you, what is the quickest way or easiest way to contact you? Where should they go?
Sure. The easiest way is my email, gloria@hpwp.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn. You can go to our webpage, but that's a lot less personal than connecting on
Yeah.
LinkedIn or via email.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Gloria. I really appreciate the time that you've taken out today. Don Miller said, love this. Great points coming from two people I've learned a lot from. Don, thank you for tuning in. To everyone that commented and asked questions, I appreciate you so much. I loved the conversation that happened today. If you missed part of the conversation, this will be available immediately on YouTube for you to rewatch, rewind, pause, whatever you want to do. And then next week, I will have a recap article. And then next week, I'm really excited. I have someone from Faro Technologies coming on, and she's going to be talking about why it's important to maybe pursue a business degree for engineering and how that's just another tool in her belt to be successful. So be sure to tune in next week for that. If you are having a hard time sharing your story and you want to keep that edge and maintain your authenticity, tune in. I got a sponsor from Z Inc. Solutions. They help companies establish their brand voice. And I hope y'all have a wonderful and safe weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Inc. Solutions. Z Inc. Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zincSolutions.com. That's z-incsolutions.com.